The direction was optional. The suffering was not. Settle in. Tonight, we're talking about medieval roads. Not highways. Not infrastructure. Not anything you'd recognize as a system. We're talking about dirt that society agreed to believe was a road. Because medieval roads were not designed to help you travel. They were designed to exist between places, and that was apparently enough. They were uneven, muddy, bone-rattling suggestions of direction. They destroyed carts, injured travelers, and turned rain into a logistical disaster. And still, everyone agreed roads were necessary. We just never agreed they should be good. What a medieval road actually was. Let's clear something up immediately. A medieval road was not built. It was used. That distinction matters. Most medieval roads were not engineered paths carved deliberately through the landscape. They were scars. Paths created by repetition, by feet walking the same direction often enough that the ground eventually gave up and stayed flat. If enough people walked somewhere, the grass died. If carts followed, ruts formed. If rain arrived, those ruts became trenches. Congratulations! You now had a road. No drainage, no leveling, no surfacing, just compacted earth, churned mud, loose stone, animal waste, and whatever else life left behind. Roads were not smooth. They were unpredictable. A single stretch could alternate between dust, gravel, mud, and standing water within a few hundred meters. In summer, they baked into hard, uneven ridges that shattered wheels. In winter, they dissolved into slurry that swallowed boots whole. Traveling on them wasn't just slow. It was violent. Roman roads ruined everything by being too good. Now, technically, Europe had good roads once. The Romans built roads that were straight, paved, drained, and engineered to last centuries. And they did. That was the problem. Because once the Roman administration collapsed, the roads didn't disappear, but the ability to maintain them did. Medieval societies inherited Roman roads like a child inheriting a grand piano. Impressive, useless, and slowly falling apart. Stone was stolen from old roads to build houses, churches, walls, anything that needed material. Drainage systems clogged, foundations shifted, and instead of repairing them, medieval communities did something simpler. They walked around the broken sections. This is how roads moved. A hole formed. People avoided it. The road widened. The old path decayed further. The new one followed convenience, not design. Over centuries, once straight Roman highways became wandering, rutted memories of themselves. Not because people were lazy, but because maintenance requires coordination. And medieval life specialized in survival, not coordination. Who was supposed to fix the road? This was the central problem. Everyone needed roads. No one wanted responsibility for them. Kings wanted roads for armies and taxes. Merchants wanted roads for trade. Peasants wanted roads to reach markets, fields, churches, and neighboring villages. But roads didn't belong to anyone in a way that created accountability. If a road collapsed, whose fault was it? The local lord, the village, the travelers using it, God. Usually, the answer was God. Because blaming God required no labor. Occasionally, kings issued decrees demanding road maintenance. These decrees were ignored with impressive consistency. Sometimes, local communities were required to perform road work as part of feudal obligation. They hated it. Road labor was unpaid, exhausting, and never finished. Fixing one section just meant the next storm would destroy it again. People understood something instinctively. Roads did not stay fixed. They decayed as fast as you repaired them. So most communities did the minimum required to keep movement possible, not pleasant. Travel was a physical risk. Let's talk about carts. Medieval carts were simple wooden constructions with iron-rimmed wheels. They had no suspension, no shock absorption, which meant every bump in the road transferred directly into the cart, the cargo, the animals pulling it, and the people riding inside. On a medieval road, carts didn't roll. They lurched. Axles snapped regularly. Wheels cracked. Loads shifted and spilled. If a wheel broke in the middle of nowhere, you didn't call for help. You unloaded the cart, dragged it to the side, and hoped you could fix it before someone stole your cargo, or before night arrived. Because night made roads worse. Not darker, more dangerous. Roads and fear. Medieval roads were not just inconvenient. They were threatening. Bandits knew roads were unavoidable. If you wanted to move goods, you had to use them. Which meant ambush points became predictable. Narrow passes, wooded curves, river crossings. Travelers were advised to move in groups when possible. Merchants hired guards if they could afford them. Pilgrims trusted faith and hoped for mercy. Roadside inns existed not for comfort, but survival. They were places where you stopped because continuing was worse. And even then, inns had reputations. Some were safe. Some were traps with better lighting. The road never ended when you stopped walking. It followed you into sleep. Rain changed everything. Rain was the enemy of medieval roads. Not heavy rain, any rain, because medieval roads had no drainage. Water pooled, mud formed, wheels sank. A dry road might be passable. The same road after rain could become impassable for weeks. Entire regions were effectively isolated seasonally, not by distance, but by moisture. Markets closed, trade slowed, messages arrived late or not at all. This wasn't rare, it was normal, and medieval people planned their lives around it. You didn't ask, how far is it? You asked, what's the road like? Distance meant time, not miles. This is important. Medieval people did not measure journeys in miles. They measured them in days. A town wasn't 10 miles away. It was a day's travel. Because the road decided the pace. A good day meant dry ground, cooperative animals, and no broken equipment. A bad day meant delays, injuries, and frustration. And there were many bad days. Which meant medieval maps weren't about precision. They were about expectation. This place is close. That place is far. This road is dangerous. That one is worse. Why roads still existed. Given all this, it's tempting to ask. Why bother? Why not abandon roads entirely? The answer is simple. Without roads, medieval society collapses. No trade, no taxation, no communication, no authority beyond shouting distance. Roads were terrible, but they were essential. And that's why they survived unchanged. They met the minimum requirement. Movement was possible. That was enough. The medieval philosophy of infrastructure. This is where medieval roads reveal something deeper. They weren't bad because people didn't care. They were bad because medieval society did not believe the world could be controlled. Nature was dominant. Weather was authority. Decay was inevitable. Roads reflected that worldview. You didn't fight the land. You adapted to it. You walked where it allowed you to walk. You waited when it refused. A perfect road implied permanence, control, predictability. Medieval life trusted none of those. Medieval roads, Part 2. Power moved slowly, on purpose. Settle back in. Last time, we established something uncomfortable. Medieval roads were terrible, not accidentally, not temporarily, systemically. They were uneven, muddy, bone-rattling suggestions of direction. They destroyed carts, injured travelers, and turned rain into a logistical disaster. And still, everyone agreed roads were necessary. We just never agreed they should be good. Tonight, we talk about why. Because roads are never just about travel. They are about control. Who roads were actually for. At first glance, it seems obvious. Roads are for everyone. Farmers, merchants, pilgrims, messengers, armies. But medieval society did not function on shared benefit. It functioned on hierarchy, and roads reflected that hierarchy perfectly. For peasants, roads were obligations. You walked them because you had no choice. For merchants, roads were risks. Every journey was a gamble between profit and loss. For kings and lords, roads were something else entirely. They were leverage. Bad roads were not always a failure. Here's the part that modern minds struggle with. Good roads make movement easy. Easy movement makes people independent. And independence is dangerous to feudal power. A world with smooth, fast roads is a world where Peasants can leave. Merchants can bypass tolls. Armies can arrive uninvited. Ideas spread faster than authority. Medieval rulers did not fear bad roads. They feared uncontrolled roads. A muddy road slows everyone equally. A broken bridge stops everyone at once. That wasn't inefficiency. That was containment. Roads and authority. Most medieval roads were local. They connected villages to fields, markets to towns, churches to parishes. Long-distance roads existed, but they were fragile chains of short segments, each controlled by someone else. Every lord controlled their stretch. Every town charged its toll. Every bridge was an opportunity to extract payment. And roads were designed to make this possible. Narrow passes, forced crossings, single usable routes. If travel was difficult, it became predictable. And predictability is power. The toll problem. Medieval roads were monetized aggressively. Tolls were everywhere. At bridges, at gates, at crossroads, at river ferries. Sometimes tolls paid for maintenance. Often they didn't. They paid for walls, for soldiers, for feasts, for absolutely nothing related to the road itself. And travelers hated this. A merchant might pay half a dozen tolls in a single day, each one draining profit. But avoiding tolls meant leaving the road. And leaving the road meant mud, forest, injury, or worse. So people paid. Bad roads kept toll booths relevant. Roads and armies. Nowhere does the problem become clearer than with armies. Medieval armies did not march like modern ones. They moved slowly. They foraged constantly. They fell apart easily. A bad road could destroy an army without a battle. Wagons broke. Supplies lagged behind. Horses injured themselves. Rain turned marches into disasters. And kings knew this, which is why improving roads was a strategic risk. A good road into your territory was also a good road for invaders. Many medieval fortifications relied on terrible access. Castles were built where roads struggled. Hills, marshes, narrow valleys. If an enemy army couldn't arrive quickly, defenders had time. Bad roads were defensive infrastructure. Why Roman roads were not rebuilt? This raises an obvious question. If Roman roads were so good, why didn't medieval rulers just rebuild them? Because Roman roads were imperial tools. They were built to move legions fast, to enforce authority across vast distances. Medieval rulers ruled smaller territories, weaker states, fragmented power. They didn't want Roman mobility. They wanted local dominance. Rebuilding Roman roads would have required central authority, long-term planning, shared funding, predictable borders, none of which medieval Europe reliably had. So Roman roads were cannibalized instead. Stone became churches. Drainage became rubble. Straightness became memory. Merchants knew the roads were bad. Merchants were not naive. They complained constantly. Records are full of grievances about broken carts, lost goods, delays, injuries, weather ruining everything. But merchants adapted. They learned seasonal routes. They memorized which roads became impassable in rain. They built networks of inns and stopping points. Trade did not require good roads. It required just enough road. And medieval roads provided exactly that. Pilgrims and faith over infrastructure. Pilgrims traveled some of the worst roads of all. Long distances, poor conditions, minimal protection, and yet pilgrimage thrived. Why? Because suffering was part of the experience. A bad road was not a flaw. It was spiritual seasoning. Mud, pain, delay. All proof of devotion. This mindset reinforced acceptance. If even holy journeys involved suffering, why expect comfort anywhere else? Road maintenance as punishment. When roads were repaired, the work was often forced. Villagers were required to fill ruts, clear debris, reinforce bridges, unpaid, unthanked, repeated endlessly, which created resentment. Roads became symbols of obligation, not benefit. People didn't fix roads because they believed in better travel. They fixed them because refusing meant punishment. So maintenance remained minimal, enough to pass, never enough to improve. the medieval speed limit. All of this created a natural ceiling on movement. Information traveled slowly. Authority weakened with distance. Local customs survived because outsiders arrived exhausted. This shaped medieval thinking. The world felt smaller. Change felt slower. Stability felt natural. Bad roads preserved that illusion. Everyone complained. No one changed it. And here is the quiet truth. Medieval people knew roads were bad. They wrote about it. They joked about it. They cursed them openly. But roads were bad in a way that felt inevitable. Like weather. Like disease. Like death. You endured them. You planned around them. You did not expect them to improve. Medieval Roads, Part 5. When bad roads became normal. Settle in. By now, we've established the obvious. Medieval roads were terrible. They were uneven, muddy, bone-rattling suggestions of direction. They destroyed carts, injured travelers, and turned rain into a logistical disaster. Still, everyone agreed roads were necessary. We just never agreed they should be good. And here's the strange part. After centuries of complaints, injuries, delays, and frustration, after endless proof that roads were slowing trade, limiting power, and exhausting everyone, people stopped arguing, not because roads improved, but because bad roads became normal. This is the part most histories skip. The moment failure stops feeling temporary and starts feeling permanent, the day nobody expected better. At some point in the Middle Ages, expectations quietly collapsed. People no longer imagined roads as something that could be fixed. They imagined them as something you endured. A journey wasn't planned around distance. It was planned around risk. You didn't ask, how far is it? You asked, how bad is the road? And that question carried everything. Because the answer determined how much you packed, how early you left, whether you went at all. Bad roads didn't just slow travel. They discouraged it, which meant most medieval people lived and died within a narrow radius of where they were born. Not because they lacked curiosity, but because curiosity had to fight mud, weather, broken axles, and exhaustion. Curiosity rarely won. How bad roads shaped medieval thinking. This matters more than it seems. When movement is difficult, the world feels smaller. When the world feels smaller, ambition shrinks with it. Medieval people didn't dream of distant places the way modern people do. Not because they couldn't imagine them, but because imagining them felt impractical. A city 2 days away might as well be another country. A journey of a week felt like a life decision. Bad roads taught people restraint. They encouraged staying put, trusting the local, accepting limitation. This wasn't cowardice. It was realism. Trade adjusted downward. Medieval trade did not collapse because of bad roads. It adapted. Goods became local. Heavy items stayed near their source. Light, valuable goods traveled farther. Spices moved. Silk moved. Gold moved. Grain did not. Stone did not. Timber rarely did. Roads quietly dictated what medieval economies could be. Entire industries were shaped not by demand, but by what could survive the road. If something broke easily, spoiled quickly, or weighed too much, it wasn't worth transporting. Roads didn't just connect markets. They filtered them. Why no one fixed the system? From a modern perspective, the solution feels obvious. Improve the roads. But that assumes a belief medieval society didn't fully share. That the future should be better than the past. Medieval life was oriented toward stability, not growth. A good year was one where nothing catastrophic happened. A bad year was one where it did. Road improvement was long-term work for short-term rulers. It required coordination across territories that barely cooperated in peace. And it required faith that tomorrow would reward today's effort. That kind of optimism was rare. Roads as moral teachers. There's another layer to this. Medieval culture often framed suffering as meaningful. Pain built character. Difficulty tested virtue. Endurance proved worth. Roads fit neatly into this worldview. A hard journey wasn't a failure of infrastructure. It was a test. If you struggled, that was expected. If you complained, that was weakness. This mindset didn't just excuse bad roads. It justified them. Comfort was suspicious. Ease was indulgent. A smooth road might even feel morally wrong. When roads did improve, quietly. Here's the irony. Roads did improve, occasionally. Bridges were reinforced. Causeways were built over marshes. Stone was laid in busy urban areas. But these improvements were local, fragmented, and fragile. One good stretch of road did not change the system. It just made the next bad stretch feel worse. So even improvement reinforced dissatisfaction, which discouraged broader effort. Progress, without consistency, felt pointless. Generations raised on bad roads. This is where the story becomes almost invisible. Children grew up watching carts break. They learned which paths flooded. They absorbed the idea that travel meant discomfort. Bad roads weren't debated. They were inherited. Just like tools. Just like customs. Just like beliefs. A child born into bad roads didn't see a problem. They saw reality. The quiet agreement. And so an unspoken agreement formed. Roads will be bad. Travel will be slow. Plans will change. We will adapt. This agreement wasn't written. It wasn't enforced. It simply settled into daily life. And once it did, the argument was over. The beginning of the end without anyone noticing. Ironically, this normalization is what allowed roads to eventually improve. Because once roads stopped being political symbols and became background facts, incremental change became possible, not dramatic reform, not sweeping projects, small fixes, local solutions, practical adjustments. But that comes later, much later. For now, medieval roads remain what they always were. Not failures, compromises that lasted centuries. Why this still matters? Because medieval roads didn't just shape medieval life. They shaped expectations. They taught societies that movement has limits. Comfort is optional. Delay is normal. Frustration is inevitable. Those assumptions linger. Even today, when roads fail, we complain. But we also accept. We plan around traffic. We expect delays. We build patience into our lives. That instinct didn't start with cars. It started with mud, where part 5 ends. So here we pause again. Not at a crossroads, but in a rut. A place worn deep by repetition. In part 6, we'll talk about the slow transition out of medieval roads, why improvement took centuries, and how the modern world inherited medieval expectations long after medieval roads disappeared. Because infrastructure doesn't just change landscapes. It changes what people believe is reasonable. And medieval roads taught the world to expect very little.